Hello and welcome to another No Man's Sky video. In this video, I'm going to take us on a journey of mathematics. Some very basic mathematics, because I'm not very good at maths. Here is a quote from the Game Rant page, which was, I think, ultimately taken from IGN, or God himself, Sean Murray. By stepping the scale up to 64-bit numbers, the number of planets is increased roughly to 2 to the power of 64. That exponentially increases the scale of things and means that it would take roughly 5 billion years to visit each planet for 1 second. That may not be the traditional definition of infinite, as promised in the trailer, but it is likely closer than any other open world game has come in the past. Okay, so visiting a planet for 1 second is not realistic. So I decided to crunch some numbers, and I'm going to take you through the process, and if there are any glaringly obvious holes in my thinking, in my thought processes, my calculations, then I fully expect to be flamed for it. Quite frankly, I'm expecting it because I'm not that good at maths. Not anymore. Since I left school anyway. Right. Okay, so the specific number of planets is 18 quintillion 446 quadrillion 744 trillion 73 billion 709 million 551,616. That's quite a lot. Now we need to factor in the number of players the game will have. Okay, so alright, we're not factoring in, we're just understanding right now the number of players that will actually be playing No Man's Sky. Now, all of this is based around some very basic guesses that could be completely and wildly off. So, behind the scenes, I've written myself a little utility so I can crunch the numbers in various different ways. But I'm just going to go ahead with the kind of the guesses that I was really kind of running with when I was going through this thought process. So Elite Dangerous has sold 1.4 million copies. Star Citizen is at 1.4 million in alpha. EVE Online 500,000. And those three are more of the kind of what I would call the nerdy space sims, the ones that are a little bit more involved in the gameplay, takes you a little while to get going, that kind of thing. And then on the flip side, we'll look at Black Ops 2, which is a completely different genre, but it's a AAA title, 24.2 million copies sold. So, because Elite Dangerous and the like are more hardcore space sims, and Black Ops 2 and the like attract more transient players who want to get into the action quickly, I would hazard a guess that No Man's Sky will be around the 7 to 10 million players, where most who would entertain Elite and Star Citizen would most likely pick up No Man's Sky also, and those who have subscribed to the hype and due to No Man's Sky's more accessible gameplay compared to these other space sims, it will gain a big portion of the more transient players. So with that, I'm going to take the medium of my guess and say 8.5 million players roughly. And remember, these are complete guesses. It could be way bigger than that when it gets released. I have no idea what the pre-order sales are like. I don't think anyone knows. I did a few web searches, got absolutely nothing. Right, so now we have to remember that you're not instantly at each planet, so it's going to take some time to get to each planet. However, this is made further more complicated by the fact that to reach them all, players will need to hyperjump or whatever technology is in place in No Man's Sky between each star. So we need to break this down, and once again all we have are guesses, so here comes a massive assumption. let's say each star has on average 9 planets. This caters for numerous systems with only 5 or so planets, balancing numerous systems with 10 or more planets. So let's just take 9, as I'm semi-confident I've heard 5 to 12 being touted as the average around on Reddit. We do have a massive question mark on this front, in that 18 quintillion planets might actually mean 18 quintillion planetary bodies, which could include moons. Take our own solar system, we have 8 or 9, depending on how old you are, planets. We have around 181 moons orbiting around our planets, including the dwarf planets. So realistically, we're adding the 5 dwarfs to our planet numbers. We could go on all day making an estimate here. So let's just make the wild assumption that the average planets per solar system is 9, and the average number of moons to be 1. 1 per planet, because I feel that it may be excessive to have numbers of moons around planets to be in the order of, say, Jupiter and Saturn numbers. I do hope to be proven wrong on that, but we won't know until we actually get in the game and start having a look around. So let's take a look at the calculation of the bodies in the game. And the first equation I'm putting up here is the average system number of bodies is equal to the number of planets on average in a system plus the number of planets in that system times by the average moons per planet. So that gives us the total number of bodies on average within a system. Using some of the numbers we were just talking about, we would be looking at a calculation of 9 plus 9 times 1, which is effectively 18. So we now need to factor in the total number of systems in the game, which we can express as the total planets in the game divided by the system average. Okay, so using our basic numbers, we would be looking at 18 quintillion divided by 18, which means roughly 1 quintillion star systems within No Man's Sky, using those kind of guessed numbers about the numbers of planets and numbers of moons, if that's even a valid expression. Okay, we need to now look at the time factors. So on average, from the videos that have been released, it seems to take a few minutes to travel from planet to planet, or is that moon to planet? So we really need to be thinking about shorter hops to and from moons and interplanetary hops. Let's say it takes about 2 minutes to get from moon to planet and vice versa, or 120 seconds. Then we have to think about planet to planet hops. These should take a bit longer. However, in order to maintain a reasonable level of transient gameplay, I would say this would take no more than 3 minutes, 180 seconds. However, we will all start on a planet. This takes 1 journey away from every player, so we will need to think about that in the calculation. Then there is the interstellar travel time. This, I understand, doesn't take all that much time. So we're looking at roughly 1 minute, 60 seconds from star system to star system. Once again, we'll need to remove 1 journey from every player due to starting in a solar system. So factoring in time now makes our calculation a little more complex. Let's take a look at it. So we move from numbers of planetary bodies and systems, for which you can see the calculation on the screen now, and we move to calculating the time taken to travel between all bodies within a solar system, and that gives us the following equation. What we're looking at here is taking the number of planets on average per system, multiplying that by the number of moons to get all of the planet to moon kind of traffic done. Now realistically you're going to be going from moon to moon, but yeah, those distances probably are going to be very similar very similar to planet to moon, so I wouldn't really expect that to be too different there. So I'm just going to use the number of planets times by the number of moons, and then we're going to times that by the time it takes to go from a planet to a moon. And then we need to add on top of that the number of planets on average within a system times by the planet to planet journey, so the time it takes to get from one planet to another, because arguably that distance should be a lot further away than a planet to its moon. So to adjust for the total number of players, we need a new term, and that's going to be P. This gives us a resolute adjustment of the time it takes to travel from solar system to solar system times by the number of players, and then for solar system travel it's the number of players times by the time it takes to go from planet to planet, because in both of those circumstances we'll have already been within a solar system and already started on a planet. And this is the major assumption everyone's making. We're not going to start in a ship, we're going to start on a planet. So that is one journey, interstellar journey, gone. There's one interplanetary journey gone. So how does this all fit together in the calculation? Well, it kind of turns it into a behemoth of a formula, and as you can see on the screen right now, it's looking a bit messy. Okay, so mathematically speaking, this is pretty darn simple. We're talking about add, subtract, multiplication and division. It's not calculus, it's not differentials and things like that. However, it's a little cumbersome to work with, so I'm going to simplify the terms now, and I'm going to just go through them. So P1 is the total number of planets, S1 is the total number of systems, T1 is the time to travel between stars, T2 time to travel between planets, T3 time to travel between moon and planet, N1 is the average number of planets per system, and N2 is the average number of moons per planet, and P, as I said before, is the number of players. And this makes our equation a bit easier to read in terms of looking at where we're going to plug in the values, although it does kind of detract from making any sense of what the values actually are, and you need this kind of key in front of you to be able to tell. So I'm now going to take a bit more of a deep dive into the calculation, and so looking at the kind of first major term, we're looking at P1, which is total number of planets in the game, which we know is a tangible figure, 18 quintillion odd planets. And we're going to divide that by the average number of planets per system plus the average number of planets times by the average number of moons per planet. And this gives us our rough estimate of how many systems there are in No Man's Sky, or how many stars there are in No Man's Sky, because I couldn't see anywhere on the web a release for the number of stars, only the figure for the number of planets. So I'm having to kind of guesstimate a lot of this. So that total number of systems is then being multiplied by the time it takes to go from system to system. Okay, so that whole piece is calculating the total amount of time it would take, say, one person to do the entire game, traveling from every star to every star. So then we need to adjust that for every player, where they will start on a planet within a star system. Okay, so we need to take away the amount of time it takes to go from star to star times by the number of players. So that's the first major term in this calculation. The second major part of this calculation is dealing with the interplanetary and moon travel element to this whole time calculation. So we're looking at N1, which is the average number of planets, multiplied by the average number of moon per planet, times by the time it takes to go from planet to moon. And I'm roughly guesstimate that is going to be the moon to moon travel time as well. Okay, because you're unlikely to go from planet to moon, back to planet, then to moon, then to planet, then to moon, then to planet. You're going to go planet to moon to planet, planet to moon to moon to moon to moon, then on to the next planet. Okay, now, so that first part takes care of the planet to moon. The second part takes care of the average number of planets times by the time it takes to go from planet to planet. So that's taking care of interplanetary travel. All right, and then we need to then adjust that by that time it takes to go from planet to planet, and multiply that by the number of players. So we're taking that away from the number, because you're going to start on a planet. We've already discussed this, and all of that is then divided by the number of players, because the number of players would reduce that total amount of time it would take. Okay, so to keep the main kind of calculation a bit more simple, what we're going to do now is calculate S1, and we'll just kind of work it back in later on. So S1 is basically P1, total number of all planets, divided by the average number of planet per system, plus the average number of planet per system times the average number of moon per planet. Okay, so that all of that is now just S1. So then we can move on to the next stage. But we still haven't factored in exploration time. So for each planetary body, we need to have a placeholder of time for exploration, which we could break down into planet exploration and moon exploration. But to keep things simple as possible, I'm just going to add one value for it. We're going to call that T4. It was originally going to be called TE, and due to technical reasons, it's going to be T4. So when we inject this back into our simplified equation, we get the following. So as you can see, you know, most of the rest of the calculation is the same. We've now substituted P1 over N1 plus N1 times N2, and we've substituted that for S1. So now that's S1 times T1 minus T1 times P. That looks a bit more simple from the top level, but we're going to have to kind of substitute it back later on when we're actually doing the numbers. Now, the addition of T4 is at the very, very end, where basically we're looking at the total number of planets times by the expected expiration time. And a kind of rough number I'm going to use for that is about 30 minutes per planet. Now, that might be a bit too narrow a window for exploration. But again, this is all just guesstimates. People could end up on a planet and it could look just completely dull, and there could be maybe no life on it at all. So that would mean that someone would just go to it, have a look around very briefly, and then go away, which would bring that average down. So, 30 minutes might not be that far from the actual truth, but it really does depend on how many of these really duff planets there are going to be. But yeah, so it's a very simple add-on to the entire equation. So what does all this mean? Well, it means by plugging in some basic assumptions into the formula, we can now predict very, very, very roughly how long it takes for all players of No Man's Sky to explore every planet within No Man's Sky. So let's do some basic numbers. First things first, I need to turn this into a Wolfram Alpha friendly notation, which looks absolutely hideous compared to the nice equations you've been seeing on the screen. Let's start plugging the numbers in. So we're going to say that P1 is the large 18 quintillion number. I'm not going to say it all again. S1 is the derived figure of P1 and the guessed averages of N1 and N2, so we'll get to that later. T1 is roughly 60 seconds, T2 180 seconds, T3 120 seconds. T4, the exploration time, I said about 30 minutes, so that's 1,800 seconds. And I was putting my guess at about 9 planets per system with an average of 1 moon per planet. And as we know, P is the number of players, so we're looking at about I think about 8.5 million. So let's start with S1, which we know is P1 over N1 plus N1 times N2, just to say that very briefly. So that's the 18 quintillion over 9 times 9 plus 9 times 1, which gives us 1 quintillion, 24 quadrillion, 819 trillion, 115 billion, 206 million, 86,201. And don't ask me to say any of these numbers when I've had a few drinks. Not gonna happen. That is still an extremely large number, 1 quintillion or so stars. But now we have S1, we can substitute it into the main calculation. So that sits right at the front there, but we now need to plug in all the rest of the stuff. So let's add the time that we know of. So we've got the 60 seconds for T1, we've got 120 seconds for T3, 180 seconds for T2, and those are in several places, and then you've got T4 at the end there with 1800 seconds. So we've got references to the total numbers of planets or the guesstimates. The complete total, so the 18 quintillion. So that's P1 being substituted out and multiplied by our exploration time at the very end of the equation there. And now we need to plug in our guesstimates for the planet numbers per system. So there's the 9 planets per system and the 1 moon per planet, right in the center of the calculation there. Finally, we need to add our player numbers. We said, like I said, just a moment ago, about 8.5 million would be my best guess. Placing it between the niche space sims and the AAA titles, I think it's gonna be somewhere in the middle there. I could be completely wrong. I hope I am completely wrong. I would like to see this game hit, AAA title sales, to be perfectly honest with you. And there we have it. We have the entire set of numbers plugged into my hokey equation to kind of figure out how long it's going to take for all the players in No Man's Sky, giving it 30 minutes on average per planet and dedicating the rest of their lives to playing this game. Yes, it's a huge number. It's a whopping 3.9136 times 10 to the 15. which in words is 913,603,539,708 seconds. Okay, so now we can rationalize this into proper time. So that gives us 65,226,722,508,995 minutes. And then we get 1,087,112,041,816 hours. Yes, it's still coming out pretty big. And then we're down to 45,296,335,075 days. And this gives us a final figure of 124,099,548 365-day years. We're going to need more people.
Like,
Sean, we're going to need more people.
shit.